Welcome back to another episode of Brotherhood Blitz. I'm your host, Deep Wop, here with my brother Fort9K.
Yo, yo. Week 6 coming up.
Yeah, 5 weeks down already in season 7.
Wild to say.
Yeah, it's going by pretty quick.
And we're starting to learn a lot about what teams are capable of and the trajectory that they're going at in terms of where you could predict they might land and finish come playoff time.
Yeah, for sure. We're definitely in the heart of everyone's schedule, and everybody's fighting for playoffs and trying to trying to show everybody what they got and give it all they got.
And we'll get into that as the episode goes along, but kind of let's get into the thick of things for this episode.
Yeah, so on Tuesday we had our first game last week, Virginia Tech versus Miami, and which was our game of the week for pre-week 5 going into it, and yeah, not what we expected. Uh,
Not even close.
Miami pulling that one off, 41-13, in which it started off pretty good. Miami started off strong like they usually do these past couple weeks. They've been doing and got off to a 13-3 lead over Virginia Tech, and it got into the second quarter with that score going. It looked like it was gonna live up to the hype there, but then Miami just they made some adjustments, and it turned out to be the right adjustments.
And Miami, the like you said, the past few weeks have absolutely destroyed teams, and their games have not been close ever since their loss to Texas in Week 1. They had a closer win in Week 2, but since then and since they switched playbooks, man, this has been a different Miami team we've seen.
Yeah, for sure. That new book they're running is really treating them well, and they're looking to make a deeper run in playoffs than they did last year, in which the only deeper they can go is to the Natty.
Trying to trying to continue strong. They have a good team, and they've built well around Ajax Legend and kind of keeping their core together. The thing is, come playoff time, it's do or die. So, I mean, if they keep winning and playing the way they are, they could be a pretty formidable opponent to look at come playoffs.
Oh yeah, and the history of the VGL. If you look back, the national championship winners aren't always the best record teams. In season 5, Michigan barely got into the playoffs and went on to win it. I believe that was season 5. Um, and then season 6 last season, LSU, um, you know, also wasn't the best schedule, but they got hot right when they needed to and really pulled off some wins and went on to win the Natty. And Miami's looking to do the same.
Yeah, I mean, they only have one loss on the season, and that's to the current number one ranked team. So you can make a case that that is obviously a quality loss, but they have beaten Maryland, who was previously undefeated, Virginia Tech, who is the number two ranked team, who was also undefeated. So they have two very, very, very good wins to kind of counter-react to that quality loss. And we'll see how kind the voting committee is to moving up with an upset win over Virginia Tech.
Moving on to the next game in week 5, we had LSU versus Louisville, in which was a blowout with LSU topping over Louisville 41-9.
And Louisville kind of struggling this season. compared to their impressive start in their debut season in the VGL. Just hasn't quite been the same team, lost some key pieces. The rushing attack is not as strong as it was previously last season. They just haven't been able to quite figure things out. Now they do have a young team. They do have a lot to build towards and look forward towards as a lot of the players they have in their team get older and further into their collegiate career. But LSU getting a nice win, a much needed win in terms to kind of keep themselves up towards the top half of the rankings.
Yeah, and Louisville, you know, they've had a decently tough schedule. Obviously, week one they faced Bama and they won that game. But week two, they put up a fight against Miami, who is one of the top teams in the league right now. Week three they lost to Michigan, pretty good there. But week four they bounced back and almost beat, in my opinion, number three team. Obviously, rankings aren't out yet, but uh, in Hawaii, they only lost that game by 5 points in a 33 to 28 thriller. And then obviously this blowout loss to LSU. But they've there's a couple games in there. They've had some close fights with some pretty good teams. So it seems like uh, they're missing just that one key piece they need, and if they can find that key piece, they can maybe turn the season around.
And they also have the third strongest strength of schedule in the league at 85.1, just behind Rutgers and Bama, who are both 1-4 and 2-3 respectively. It's hard to say what really could be the issue. Then again, LSU, very, very good team. At 3-2 record, ranked five as it is now. But if you look at both these teams' schedules the next 2 weeks, LSU got ECU and Mizzou, while Louisville has Mizzou and then Texas. So both those teams have a common opponent. We'll look to see how those games go and how if Louisville can potentially uh, try and sneak into the playoffs.
Next, we have Arkansas versus East Carolina, in which it started to live up to a little bit of hype. People were starting to get excited about that game, but Arkansas just came out, proving to everybody why they should have won that game and and put on a pretty good show, winning that one 66 to 23.
Yeah, ECU, I love ECU. And now that under new head coach Captain Rush, could we expect some changes in which how the offense and the team is ran going forward? Now, Arkansas, I think they're a little bit underranked and somewhat underperforming at times through the season, but getting a nice, very large margin of victory, 66-23. It's a good statement win. Kind of get something going. You've proved now your offense is capable of scoring points and your defense is capable of holding teams below 25, below 30 points. Can you keep that up?
Yeah, especially in the bigger games like they've played this season and played them close. They just need to figure out those key moments that they need to win those big games, and just like you pretty much said, it starts in these smaller games and gain learn from this, gain the momentum and into the next week, and take it week by week.
And East Carolina, the season hasn't gone the way many expected this season to go so far. Uh, but like I said, under new head coach, we might be seeing a different East Carolina team.
Yeah, look, they're 1-4, But look, there's 9 weeks in this season. You could get into the playoffs with a 5-4 uh, record. Crazier things have happened.
I agree with that. Just it's gonna be tough with the losses they have currently. They would have to beat some pretty high ranked teams to kind of get those quality wins and make a case that they deserve to be in. But we have a lot of like we have 4 more weeks of season 7 or regular season, so who knows?
And hey, the week we had, 2 weeks ago, we had a few upsets, so never count anything out.
Yeah, the week was wild.
We'll go into the next game.
And we got Georgia and North Carolina, with North Carolina getting a 44-6 victory, which kind of was a nice needed win for North Carolina, but also it was in kind of a must-win situation for Georgia as they fall to 1-4 on the season.
Yeah, I had North Carolina winning this game, but I honestly thought it was going to be a good close game. But props to North Carolina. They came out, you know, showcasing that why they're a top ranked team in the league and putting up 44 points and only allowing 6.
Yeah, holding a team to 6 points less than basically a touchdown uh, is very hard to do.
Yeah, very hard
Now,
to do, especially in this high scoring league.
now North Carolina obviously got upset by Rutgers in week 4. I know that going into that game against Georgia, against head coach Gene, who also happened in fact used to play for North Carolina on that North Carolina championship team in season 3. So a little bit of history there between North Carolina and Georgia and head coach Gene and head coach Kate and Winley also on North Carolina. A lot of history in that game. So for North Carolina getting a win over a player who used to be on their team now coaching for Georgia and Gene, it had to felt good to bounce back after a loss to Rutgers on a Hail Mary and then go out and beat Georgia 44-6.
Yeah, great comeback win after an upset loss like last week, like you said. Um, but they're back on track. They're 3-2 now, and looking to stay in the top teams in the league to cruise into the playoffs.
Going on to the next game that we have, it's Hawaii beating Missouri 38-23, which on paper, Hawaii should have won by more than what they did.
Yeah, look, props to Mizzou. Scoring 23 on a team like Hawaii, they perform pretty well, and it almost looked like Mizzou was gonna pull it off, but there towards the end, Hawaii found what they were you know found out their mistakes and corrected them and made the right adjustments there at the end.
And I think fatigue and just overall sheer willpower and the talent difference kind of towards the end of that game. And you gotta give props, like you said, to Rudy, and give props to Gunn for kind of starting to figure stuff out. But I think you gotta have a lot more formidable wins and better looking wins over these, lower ranked teams. And it's not, and I love Gunn. Gunn, if you listen or anyone that listens that's on Hawaii, I love y'all. We got a lot of former Texas players on there as well. But only winning by 15 against number 16th ranked team who hasn't had a win yet starts to raise some concerns and some questions on why are these games so close, or why obviously 15 points, that's a decent margin of victory, but being, top three ranked team in the league, the point still stands.
Moving on to Texas versus Michigan, in which was a offensive showout. Defensive stayed on the bus.
I don't even think the defenses made the fight to the stadium.
Yeah, it was. Texas started strong with the pick on the Michigan's first drive, and went up to, I believe it was 17-0. They're pretty early, and then it kind of stayed that uh, the score, the difference of the score kind of stayed that much the whole game, and it was air ball after air ball and points after points. There was no defense that game.
Yeah, that second half, it felt like neither team would stop scoring. I think there was 2 punts combined that entire game.
Yeah, that's wild.
I won't talk too much on the game just because obviously both of us being on Texas. But I want to give some props to Michigan, kind of giving Texas a run for their money and JJ Brady having a fantastic game. Obviously threw 2 picks, one being a pick six, but threw, 7 touchdowns, over 500 yards, and airing it out. Running game wasn't as, dominant and as crucial as Texas had during that game, but they were able to convert on a high percentage of third downs and kind of try and keep this game close.
Yeah, Michigan, like you said, their offense played great. They played very good, and when you score 49 points in this league, it's a very good chance you're gonna walk away with a win. But like we said earlier, with the defensives not even showing up that game, yeah, it's that was a very very high scoring game.
And it's also a weird week where 3 teams scored over 60.
Yeah, I just realized that.
And it's also, I believe this is one of the higher scoring games ever between 2 teams combined in the league.
Another crazy stat.
I could be wrong because I know the Michigan MSU game last season. I think it was week 9. While I'll let you talk a little bit while I go fact check myself.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and move on to the Maryland Alabama game, and which was another very high scoring game with Maryland winning over Alabama 62-43, and which was another, like I said, offensive shutout or
Before I
show
get
out.
it, before I get into that game, no, I that game was not nearly as high scoring. Michigan MSU was 34-32 in week 9, and then they proceeded to play the very next week in the playoffs where MSU won 37-34.
Yeah, so definitely not as high scoring as these games this week.
No. But going into the Maryland Bama game wasn't as close at first. Maryland up to like a 21 nothing start. Looked very, very dominant, and then, you know, Bama started to get some things rolling, getting their air attack involved, getting some really good returns on kickoff as well from their QB, mind you, who's doing it all, running, passing, returning kicks. Just wasn't quite able to get the scoring drives that they needed later on in the game and get those key stops on third downs. As Maryland, as you see, scoring 62.
Yeah, it like you said, Maryland started off strong, went up to a very good, comfortable lead, but as the middle of that game started to roll around, Alabama started clawing back. And I believe at one point it was 38 Maryland, 35 Alabama, and it looked like Alabama was going to start, you know, pulling, get in the lead and start pulling away with it, but Maryland went back to what was working, and yeah, it was another shutout after that.
And going on to the final game of week 5 was number 9 Rutgers taking on FAU, Florida Atlantic, in which FAU wins 38 to 17.
Yeah, this was a pretty talked about game going into it, as both teams were talking, some friendly trash talk in the league chat there, and it made this game exciting to look forward to, and but Florida Atlantic coming in strong after that upset last week, um, or was that 2 weeks ago? When was that upset?
That was week 4 when the Rutgers beat North Carolina and FAU lost to Bama also in week 4.
Yeah, so Florida Atlantic, bouncing back. Um, they did a phenomenal job bouncing back, and they look good. Scoring 38 against Rutgers is a pretty good show, and holding them to only 17 points.
I just now found a very weird thing. FAU beat Rutgers 38-17, right?
Hmm.
If you look at week 4, Bama beat FAU 38-17.
Oh wow!
It's the same score. The same exact score.
And get this, the same exact game, last game of the week.
Yeah, last game of the week.
Wow,
Well, there's a cool little fact for y'all, for those that listen. Interesting.
well, that's very interesting. But that's
Well, getting
that's all the games that week. But that was not as crazy as the week before. Um, but a few good ones in there. But yeah, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, yeah, no, and going back into that game, FU kind of had a really good control pretty much throughout the entire game.
Yeah, they definitely had the momentum, pretty much the whole game there.
I know they definitely had a lot of momentum. But we're gonna go in and pick our game of the week for week 5.
Yeah, week 5 game of the week. You know, it's a very tough week here, just because we really didn't have any super close games. Um, but I'm gonna go with the highest scoring game of the week in that Texas versus Michigan game, and it was a very fun game to watch. If you like offenses, and don't like defensive games, that was a very fun game to watch, and that's our pick for game of the week.
Now, mind you, we're probably gonna get some slack for picking our own game, but if you actually, for anyone that's actually watched that game and watched it in its entirety, you'll quickly realize that it'll be one of the most entertaining games you'll watch in quite some time. And that's why we picked it. Not because it's Texas, but because of how entertaining as a whole that game was. And you got to give props to Michigan for that.
Yes, definitely props to Michigan. They definitely gave us a run for their money.
But yeah, no, that's our game of the week. But now we go into our next portion of the episode and kind of Dylan talk us into that.
Yeah, usually it's next next topic is hit stick play of the week. We didn't get any this week, um, but just a reminder: if you see a great hit stick that you think is a good candidate for hit stick play of the week, um, just go ahead and clip it in chat on Twitch as you're watching the game, and then go into the Discord, and you can send that clip to either me or 49K, and we will go through all of our candidates and pick one for hit stick play of the week and give you a shout out. But this week we didn't have any, so we will be moving on to our players of the week.
And which is a pretty star-studded player of the week.
Yeah, we had some records be broken.
Definitely did. As trying to get my PC to quit being a turd.
While we wait on that, I'll go ahead and name.
There we go.
Oh, there you
Got
go.
it. Sorry, it's
Okay.
technical difficulties. Uh, Google being slow. It's being a goober. But yeah, we'll start off with naming off. We're gonna do it a little bit differently as we did last week, as we both collectively felt took a little too long to go through each and every player and all their stats. We're still gonna name all the players out on the ballot just to give credit where credit is due for even making it on it. But the winner will be the one where we'll name your stats and give you a little bit more in-depth credit. But going for the offensive ballot for week 5, you got Remy Melanishin, QB for Texas, with 85.2 fantasy points. You got Rain Alexander, QB for Arkansas, with 64.5 fantasy points. JJ Brady, QB for Michigan, 61.1 fantasy points. Rolls Royce, halfback for LSU, with 49.8 fantasy points. Tiny wide receiver Debo, wide receiver for Maryland, 46 fantasy points. Cole Penhagen, wide receiver for North Carolina, 40.8 fantasy points. Damon Williams III, wide receiver for Michigan, 40.5 fantasy points. Thad Castle, tight end for Michigan, 28.6 fantasy points. Cookie Cutter, halfback for Maryland, 27.1 fantasy points. And then Blaze Dover, halfback for Hawaii, with 26.7 fantasy points.
Yeah, congratulations to all those that were on the offensive player of the week ballot. On to the defensive side, congratulations to Ezekiel Lehman. Lehman, is that did I say that right?
One or the other. We're sorry if I butchered your last name.
I think it's Ezekiel Lehman. DT of LSU, scoring 20.0 fantasy points. Malik Rhodes, strong safety for Louisville, 17.5 fantasy points. Sawyer Wallace, middle linebacker for Florida Atlantic, scoring 17 fantasy points. Kellen Noble, cornerback, Arkansas, 16.5 fantasy points. Jack Hammer, middle linebacker for Rutgers, 16 fantasy points. Caleb Brinkley Jr., strong safety for Hawaii, 16 fantasy points. Kitty Kate, middle linebacker, North Carolina, 16 fantasy points. Angel Torres Jr., cornerback, Miami, 15 fantasy points. J.D. Crabtree III, defensive end of Maryland, 15 fantasy points. And King Trident, free safety of Miami, 14 fantasy points.
A very tough group to make the defensive ballot, in which does not, you could say there's not really a clear cut person for who should win it, but we'll get into that momentarily as we will name our special teams player of the week who is on the ballot. You got Tyler Maddox, cornerback for East Carolina with 2.1 fantasy points. Memphis Reigns, QB for Alabama with 2 fantasy points. Theo Hart, strong safety for Maryland with 1.9 fantasy points. Andrew Powell, wide receiver for Texas with 1.8 fantasy points. And Jacob Sedera, cornerback for Rutgers with 1.7 fantasy points.
Yeah, congratulations to all those that were on the ballots. And yeah, we'll get right into it. And um, Colton, what's our pick for offensive player of the week?
Now, offensive player of the week was unanimous by both of us. And our offensive player of the week is Remy Melanishin, QB for Texas, who broke the single game fantasy points record with 85.2 fantasy points, and is also up, I believe, 6 all time for most rushing yards in a single game, and second most rushing yards by a QB in a single game. And they had 27 for 34, 348 yards, 10.2 average through the air, and 4 touchdowns. And also ran for 22 attempts, 198 yards with an average of 9 per clip and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, wild game he had, and again, yeah, he's on Texas, but if if you look at his stats, look at the records he broke, it's a no brainer. And even on the ground, he had at one point over 200 yards, but obviously there at the end of the game, the kneeling brought him back under 200. But yeah, what a game Remy Melanchin had.
And really, in a week where a few players had outstanding games and made, you know, some crazy type of performances, just when you have a player of any caliber have 8 total touchdowns and more than half of the team's total offense through the air and on the ground, I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, so congratulations to Remy. Obviously, this isn't official. This is just Brotherhood Blitz pick. Um, so take this with a grain of salt, if you will. But yeah, congratulations to Remy and everybody else that made the ballot. Moving on to defense. Um, Defense was a little tough. Me and Colton spent probably 10-15 minutes before starting this episode, kind of looking through these and trying to decide our pick. We had a few of them, and we talked through it, and it was a very tough decision, but we came to the conclusion of congratulations to Ezekiel Lehman. Um, like we said, DT of LSU, scoring 20.0 fantasy points with 5 tackles for 5 sacks. And 5 sacks as a def- defensive tackle is that's you had a crazy game.
I definitely agreed. He also is not on the, player of the week thing, and Vex, if you're listening, please let's put TFLs on the defensive thing because that is a good thing to look at for certain positions in terms of determining whether or not they deserve to win it. Just my 2 cents. But yes, 5 tackles, 5 TFLs, and 5 sacks. So every tackle he got was a TFL, obviously, because of the sacks, but as a DT. Normally, when you hear of a player getting 5 sacks in a single game, mind you, it's normally by a DE end. You normally don't see that from a defensive tackle who, more as of recently this season, has had some really, really good games. And that's also looking at the records. He tied is now in a four-way tie for the most sacks in a single game.
Yeah, so congratulations to him. And yeah, 5 sacks is crazy. But moving on to special teams, this one was unanimous, as we both have decided, um, like I said, unanimously. Con- Congratulations to Tyler Maddox, cornerback of East Carolina, with 2.1 fantasy points, going 6 kick returns for 214 yards with an average of 35.7. It's a pretty good
Yeah,
average he
basic.
had. And yeah, just 35.7 average is, you're most likely going to win it every time.
And they didn't get the win against Arkansas, but I mean, he gave their team great field position every time he touched the ball on kick returns,
Yeah, one of
almost
them,
getting it to the 40 every time.
one of them, I thought he was taking it. It looked like he was going to take that one all the way, but He had one man to beat, and he just got him tripped up.
And still, only one person in the league has a kick return touchdown, and that was all the way back in week one. But there's been a few players so far this season that have been so close to getting one.
Yeah, but congratulations to everybody on the ballot, and congratulations to those three, as they are our pick for Brotherhood Blitz Players of the Week for Week 5.
And congratulations to you three.
Now we are moving on to Week 6 of the VGL. 4 weeks left in the regular season.
Yeah, and this is a pretty crucial week for some teams in terms of a loss this week could almost mathematically eliminate you from playoff contention.
Yeah, it's starting to get into a bunch of teams must win scenarios. So it's going to get interesting. Um, so, teams are definitely going to have to lock in and make those correct adjustments and game plan well against their opponent the rest of the regular season.
And we'll quickly get into it with the first game of week 6, Hawaii versus Texas.
Yeah, you got number one ranked Texas versus number three ranked Hawaii, as I do believe they will both stay that rank. I don't think we have the official rankings out yet. I think those are coming out tomorrow. But I do believe, in my opinion, they will both be staying the rank they are. It's going to be a good matchup. It's kind of like what we had last week with Virginia Tech versus Miami, but I think this might be a lot closer than the VT Miami game, and it's gonna come down to which offense can score more. Um, both defenses, um, you know, they're gonna have to make the right adjustments with both of these high scoring offenses.
Yeah, I could see potentially where this game could be close. Hawaii, not necessarily a must-win game, but definitely a game that they want to try to make a statement in being the potentially the first team to beat Texas this season.
Yeah, for sure. And they definitely have a great roster, and it's going to be a kind of a sweet and sour kind of game for Texas, as they go into this game with a lot of players that were on Texas last season are on Hawaii this season. So it's going to be a fun matchup, and going up against some old friends in Chad, and it's going to be a fun night.
I definitely agree. And for my pick 'em this game, I mean it's no brainer. I'm Texas.
Yeah. Um, you know, we try to stay as much unbiased as possible on this podcast, but yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Texas here. Um, yeah,
Keep it short and sweet.
yeah. Moving on to the next game on Tuesday, we have LSU versus East Carolina.
A really a must-win game for East Carolina. I mean, they potentially, I mean, they have to win out at this point to realistically potentially having a shot of getting enough key wins to make the playoffs. LSU obviously needing a win right here to keep their spot kind of safe in terms of rankings and going as we get closer to the end of the season. But East Carolina, new head coach, new playbook. Could this potentially be a trap game for LSU, which they potentially overestimate East Carolina?
Yeah, look, that new playbook they have, it's a very good playbook, and it's a playbook you do not want to uh, kind of overlook, as the opponent, and LSU needs to be very careful because Clemson is, yeah, Clemson can do some very Clemson things, and East Carolina could definitely sneak up behind LSU and snag a win from up underneath them.
My pick for this game, I do think LSU is going to win this one. Just hard to know what East Carolina potentially is going to look like coming into with a, like I said, new head coach, new playbook. Don't know exactly what we're getting out of East Carolina now. Now, if they're still in their previous playbook, I think this probably game won't be close. But I am going to pick LSU, but it's going to be closer than what people might think it be.
Yeah, and with Clemson being East Carolina's playbook, LSU isn't, you know, they're pretty familiar with that Clemson book, facing it as they faced Texas in the national championship last season, as Texas had Clemson, and look how close that game was. So Clemson, is a very very good book, and uh, but yeah, I'm gonna have to side with Colton here. I think LSU is just the talent difference is too too much of a difference here, and I think LSU pulls this one off.
And going into the next game, we got Missouri taking on Louisville, in which both these teams kind of out of the mix of playoffs, but potentially Louisville needing really a win here to potentially make a case. But Missouri at 0-5, almost just trying to play devil's advocate and, you know, kind of force teams to have to think differently and try and see if they can snag a win, a couple wins for the rest of the season to knock some teams out.
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup. Um, Mizzou is still looking for their first win, and they looked pretty good last week against Hawaii, as Hawaii's number three ranked team. So this game could get interesting, and it could get interesting quick. Um, but I think Louisville is gonna, you know, they still have more hope than Mizzou has for playoff appearance. I think Louisville, it's going to take a lot to get into the playoffs, but I do think they do have that little bit of hope, and I think they're going to use that little bit of hope into this game and use that to their advantage and come out with a win here.
Yeah, I like. I have a few. I love both teams, right? Ruri, great coach for Missouri. Says try has a young team trying to figure things out after an extended absence from being head coach previously in the VGL. And you got Louisville, you got Measy trying to get this team back into shape that it was last season, barely missing the playoffs. You got Digi at quarterback, and Johnny Gray Jr. You got Cam and his wife at wide receiver. Potentially, on paper they look good, but give me them Tigers to get their first win of the season.
Ooh, I was not expecting you to go there. That's what, I definitely could see the scenario that happens, but um, yeah, like I said, I think Louisville's going to use their hope of that playoff life, and they're going to use it to their advantage. And I think they're going to topple over Mizzou here.
Yeah, I feel like I've gone for so many upsets this season that has bit me in the butt. I'm trying to get some wins back from doing so poorly in fantasy this season, or
Yeah,
in pick'em, excuse me.
but yeah, it's going to be an interesting game. I'm excited to watch that one for sure.
And so am I.
Going into the next game, second game of the Wednesday slate, we have Miami versus North Carolina, in which that's going to be a very good game, I think.
I'd like to think it's going to be. Now, Miami has destroyed teams for 3 weeks straight. North Carolina coming off of a pretty impressive win over Georgia, and really both these teams right now currently playoff teams and both playoff caliber teams. This can determine a lot of things. Will Miami get tested in their new playbook and get their second loss this season, or is North Carolina just kind of outmatched and outclassed a little bit in terms of sheer talent and willpower? Hard to say. Both these coaches, great. Swaggy, amazing coach, has done things that no one did last season. First undefeated regular season. Kate has been around the game for a while. It's got a great, talented team. Ryan Winley at quarterback, freshman. But Miami has the talented roster built and glued together by juniors who are all going to graduate in this, after next season. Hard to say how this game can go.
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup because last week Miami faced Virginia Tech in what we thought was going to be a very close game, but um, yeah, like we've said these past 3 weeks, Miami is their has been insane with that new book. But it's going to be interesting because North Carolina, they have a better defense than Virginia Tech, and if they can figure out a way to hold that Miami offense to even in the 20s and the low 30s, can North Carolina score just enough on that Miami defense to pull off the win and pull off the upset? It's an interesting matchup, honestly.
Yeah, it's a hard game to determine like kind of which way you're leaning. Uh, you know, Miami has shown that they can blow teams out and blow them in insane fashion. But North Carolina, like I do think they have a slightly better secondary than VT does. I'm gonna pick North Carolina for the upset.
I agree. I'm going North Carolina here. I'm sorry, Swaggy, but I
Swaggy's
think,
about to hate us both.
yep, we're gonna, yeah,
I
yeah,
expect a DM as soon as this comes out and Swaggy gets a
yeah.
wind of wind of this.
Monday at 2 a.m. our time, we're gonna get tagged in LC. I'm calling it.
Yep, I almost expect that to happen.
But yeah, like I said, I'm this is probably one of my most looked forward to games so far this season. Um, Next to that Miami Virginia Tech one, obviously that one, didn't live up as much hype as I was hoping for, but I think this one is for sure going to live up to the hype, and I think North Carolina can stop that Miami offense.
Yeah, I agree, and it's kind of gonna tell us a few, kind of get confirm a few questions that I have, which I'm gonna keep to myself about both these teams.
Yeah, moving on to the last game of the Wednesday slate, you got Florida Atlantic versus Maryland.
Both these teams looking to stay in the playoff race. Now, Maryland only one loss, and that's to Miami. They were undefeated at the time when they faced Miami, but that's their only loss, quality loss. FAU, you have a few good wins, some quality, but you lost pretty bad to Bama. Now, you made up for it by beating Rutgers, who beat UNC, but can you keep up that momentum? You've been kind of FAU's been a little wishy-washy and hard to kind of calculate what kind of team are we getting week to week on a week to week basis, right? Their offense at times looks like a top offense in the league. Same with their defense. I mean, look at week one. But you also have times being consistent in offense, whether I don't know, it could be relying too much on the run game, you know, being a little bit too conservative at times, too aggressive at times. Hard to say what type of offense we're going to get from FAU. Now, Maryland has kind of showed us the team they're capable of and they're capable of being.
Yeah, it's another interesting matchup. Like you said, Florida Atlantic kind of being an up and down team. They've faced adversity and some of them didn't pass the adversity test, but um, yeah, like you said, they've showed to be one of the top offensives in the league, and it's gonna be a great matchup against Maryland. Um, who do you have in that game?
I'm going to go with FAU.
Yeah, man, I think I'm gonna have to agree. I definitely could see a scenario where Maryland pulls it off, but I think Florida Atlantic's gonna they're gonna come out with the right offense, and they're gonna come out scoring pretty quick.
I a little bit different take on this game in terms of the way that I see you looking at it. I don't think this is going to be a high scoring game at all. I think it's going to be like a 24-27, 27-32 type of a win where it's going to come down to one key big play from either team. Now, I'm picking FAU to win this game, but I think this is probably clear down the middle as you can get between both teams. If Maryland's QB Parsons p- continue to play the way he is capable of playing so far this season, I think they can easily beat FAU, and it might not even be close. Now, I think FAU's defense outside of Miami's is the toughest that Maryland's played so far this season, and they have the speed to kind of keep up with both their dual threat quarterback and also their fast receiver and wide receiver, tiny wide receiver Debo. That's why I also think this could potentially be a very close, low scoring, medium scoring game.
Yeah, I do see this being a close game, um, but I do believe Florida Atlantic will be pulling that one off.
And going into the next game of our Week 6 slate, first game on Thursday, Virginia Tech versus Alabama.
Yeah, Virginia Tech, coming off a pretty big loss to Miami, looking to bounce back, and it's a good game to bounce back in as they face Alabama, who is, I believe, 1-4. Um, you know, it it's a must-win game for Alabama, but I think Virginia Tech is too big of an opponent for them, and Virginia Tech's hungry coming off of that loss, and I think they're gonna pull this one off in a pretty big win.
I'm gonna pick. I'm just get it out of the way. I think Virginia Tech does win this game pretty handedly. It sucks for Bama because I love Maddie, and Maddie's trying and has proved he's capable of, you know, keeping games close, putting up points. It's just the roster isn't quite coming together in terms of the talent and the progression some of these players should be having in terms of how they're supposed to be, grow going on in their careers. But I do think Virginia Tech is going to be hungry coming in. Blood is a taste of blood in their mouth from losing to Miami. I think they come in and they make a statement type of game against Bama.
Moving on to Arkansas versus Michigan. This is going to be another great matchup. Michigan coming off of a loss to Texas, but showing a good offensive show out against Texas, and Arkansas proven to be one of the teams that they've showed heart. They've been in there, in the trenches in those big games against big big name teams, and you know they're looking to take another win, and it's gonna be a great matchup. And man, what are your thoughts on it?
I do could see cases where this game could be very close, or it could be a big blowout. I'm gonna get my pick out of the way, and I say Arkansas wins by a decent bit.
Yeah, I definitely see this game, going. I could see it going either way. Um, Michigan, scoring, um, you know, 40 plus points against number one ranked Texas. Man, this this one's hard. It's a hard pick on this one, but I think I'm gonna have to agree with you. I'm gonna have to go with Arkansas here.
And my reasoning for picking Arkansas is I think Arkansas's offense is a lot more talented wide receiver wise and passing attack wise to kind of hard to stop. I mean, they've shown that this season. I think Michigan's defense is going to be tested yet again back to back weeks in terms of through the air. Yeah, I still got Arkansas.
Moving on to Georgia versus Rutgers. Say that's a pretty good matchup too. What are your thoughts on that one?
This is a tough game because both these teams need wins. Rutgers now at 2-3, Georgia 1-4. Georgia, a loss here, yeah, is basically putting you out of the playoffs. Rutgers, a loss here, also putting you out of the playoffs. So a must-win game for both teams. I am gonna have to pick Rutgers.
Ooh, going against your season hot take there.
Yeah, my
I believe you had a little bit of a mic hiccup there.
season has a variety of different. Oh, sorry about that. I Georgia hasn't been playing quite up to where I thought they would be this season.
Yeah, it's kind of a one of those who wants it more games, as like you said, both teams need this win to stay in the playoff race. But yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Rutgers here too. It's a moderate win too, so you know who's gonna have the better run game too,
Some questions will be answered that game.
for sure.
But I believe that is all that we have this episode. If Dylan, you want to add any final little things before we end this one.
Yeah, I'll just do our real quick. Do our games of the week. Um, yeah, I'm gonna have to go with my game of the week being that Miami North Carolina game.
My pick is going to be the FAU Maryland.
Both good options, and yeah, we got some great games this week. So a lot of things are gonna be answered, and come next week we are gonna start seeing who is out of the race for playoffs and who is really fighting and needs to win out.
There's a lot of things that will be answered, but that is for next time. We appreciate everyone for tuning in and listening. Also, thanks to Vex and Gates for putting our podcast on the website and the art new little article thing. We appreciate you, and we appreciate Cam as well, giving shout outs and really appreciating the work that we put into this week in and week out. And we appreciate everyone for tuning in and listening. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe already. Share, like with a friend, get them into the VGL. And as always, thank you for listening to the Brotherhood Blitz.